Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, Zoe in the Books. Today I wanted to do something really fun where we read some books on NPR's Books We Love list, where they curate books over the years that they love. I have a long history of loving NPR, or the National Public Radio, here in the United States. I've been listening to NPR since I was a kid. I remember fondly listening to This American Life on Sundays, starting when I was 3, 4, 5 years old, and regularly listening to different NPR programming. Interesting fact about me, when I grew up we didn't have cable, so one of our primary sources of entertainment when I was growing up was listening to the radio or reading, so hence where my love of reading came from. But NPR was a constant source of entertainment in our house growing up. And then in the car whenever we drove, I used to live in a very rural area in Montana, especially when I was really young, and then even doing cross Montana road trips, because to get from one city to another typically takes 2 to 3 hours at a minimum. We were often listening to NPR, and NPR is where I listened to a lot of my breaking news when I was younger. But NPR is something that I continue to love to this day, and I donate to with using some of my spare money as a federal employee. We are able to contribute and donate through what's called the Combined Federal Campaign. So part of my weekly or bi-weekly paycheck goes to my local NPR channel. And I think one of the other things that I love about NPR, not only the coverage that they have at the national level on some of the arts and the culture, and then just some of the national topics that they have, but NPR across the country is sometimes some of the only sources of local media for many parts of the country, as mega media conglomerates have gone and bought out small media firms. So lots to love about NPR, and so I thought I'd shine a little light on them today and look at some of the books that they love from 2025. And so what I have done is I have looked at all the categories that they have for 2025. I built a spinner wheel. The only topics that I took out were cookbooks and food, because I didn't really want to focus on cookbooks, and then I took out kids books. So I'm going to spin 5 times, and then within each of these categories there's a certain number of books, and we're going to do a random number generator, and I'll read whatever book it comes up with. And so the categories that NPR has for 2025 are staff picks, book club ideas, eye-opening reads, seriously great writing, fiction, nonfiction, biography and memoir, comics and graphic novels, cookbooks and food, which again I'm not including in this one, historical fiction, kids books, again not including that one, love and romance, mysteries and thrillers, sci-fi, fantasy, and speculative fiction, all one category, short stories, essays, and poetry, all one category, young adult. And then for the ones that kind of spread across genres, family matters, for art lovers, for history lovers, for music lovers, for sports lovers, funny stuff, identity and culture, it's all geek to me, let's talk about sex, no biz like showbiz, science, the states we're in, tales from around the world, the dark side, rather long and rather short. So lots of interesting options here. For 2025, they've selected 384 books. Some of these books I've read, but many I have not, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what our options are. So let's take a look at our first category that we're going to be picking from. Okay. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, look at how lucky we are. Sci-fi, fantasy, and speculative fiction. You guys. Oh my god. This is excellent news. Okay, there's 40 titles, and I'm going to do 1 through 40. Let's see. Okay, let's do some counting. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. The Last Tiger by Julia Ryu and Brad Ryu. Okay, so it's written by 2 different authors. I have no idea what this one's about. There's a lot of titles on this list that I've heard of and that I know something about, but this is one of the few that I know nothing about. I'm gonna spin 5 different just in case there's some at the library that I can't find or that take too long for me to get in time. Oh, that's exciting. Okay. Okay, for our next one. Let's see. Ooh, for history lovers. Oh my gosh. You guys, this is going so well. What the heck? What is going on? For history lovers. Let's see, how many are there? 46. I feel like a lot of these are nonfiction, but that's okay. That's exciting to me. I like historical nonfiction for the most part. So let's see. 44. Okay, that's easy. We'll just go 2 from the bottom. 1, 2. Oh, this is interesting. We covered this in my New York Times notable books, and this was one of the ones that I said I wasn't all that interested in reading. We the People, A History of the U.S. Constitution. In part, it wasn't because the topic isn't interesting to me, it's because I took quite a few courses on constitutional law and constitutional history when I was in college, and so I just didn't know how much I would have to gain from this, but perhaps I will find this to be insightful because I already understand the topic quite well. So, okay, I'm excited to try this one out. Let's see what our next one is. Okay, we almost got historical fiction and I was like, oh my god. Okay, comics and graphic novels. Okay, I'm interested in that. Sometimes graphic novels go really well for me, so like I like the Heartstopper volumes. I read Blue is the Warmest Color last year and I really liked that, so I'm interested to see how this one goes. 24. Okay. 16. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Photographic Memory, William Henry Jackson in the American West, a graphic novel. Interesting. I like books about the American West. I like westerns because I grew up in the West. Those tend to speak well to me. So photographic. I haven't heard anything about this. I'm curious about this. Ooh, rather long. This scares me. Rather long. Okay, this could be like, this could be anything. 77? Okay, hold up. 33. Okay, let me be careful counting these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33. Harlem Rhapsody by Victoria Christopher Murray. I haven't heard of this either. Okay, one more, you guys. Ooh, for art lovers. I've read some really interesting books about art before, so let's give that a go. For art lovers, I could do this all day. This is really fun. Occasionally 19. Ooh, and Immaculate Conception is on here. There's some good books on this one. Okay, let's see. 16. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Ooh, I already got that one. I already got that one. So I'm gonna re-roll because that's not fun. Or should I redo the number? I'm gonna redo the number. 1. What's the number 1? The Art of Jacques Pepin. Favorite recipes and paintings from my life. No, I'm not doing this one. I said I was not doing cookbooks. I'm not doing this one. We're gonna redo the number one more time. 7. Okay. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Girl on Girl. I've seen a lot of good press about this one, so I'm actually interested in this one. Okay, there we have the soft TBR of the video. I'll check in with you when I have the books and when we get started reading. See you soon. Hi there, good evening. I just went to the library and I picked up my holds for today's video. I am pleased that I think we are able to get 3 out of 5 books. I was able to pick up 2 physically, and the 2 books that I was able to get physically were The Last Tiger by Julia Ryu and Brad Ryu. This is, I found out, a brother-sister duo, and it sounds like we are going to be in some sort of colonized fantasy world. There's some ancient magic, and it looks like there might be a relationship between, it says, Lee Seung, a servant yearning for freedom, and Choi Yunji, a noble girl defying tradition, join forces to try to reshape their respective fates. But their relationship evolves from a begrudging accomplices to bitter adversaries as they soon find themselves on opposite sides of a battle over the last tiger, a symbol of their people's lost freedom and the key to the liberation of their country. Okay, that's interesting. Oh, it's a tale of forbidden romance, antagonist turned allies, oppression, and liberation. And I guess it's also inspired by true stories from the author's grandparents' lives during the darkest periods in Korean history. And then there's also printed edges. They're kind of pretty, like finger waves. So that's pretty. On the back cover, there's a tiger. So that'll be cool. And then I think it's cool that it's a brother-sister duo. This is interesting too. Brad Ryu is an MFA candidate in fiction at NYU. Huh. And Julia Ryu is a composer, lyricist, playwright, and novelist. So some forbidden romance between some young girls. Actually, I shouldn't say young girls. I don't know if Lee Seung is a girl, a male, female, or non-binary. I want to read this right now. I can't read it right now, but I want to. Hold on. Let's see. Author's note. Oh, it's a great tale. One of a boy and girl from opposite worlds who overcame immense hardship to build a life together, inspired by their grandparents. Okay. I'm an idiot. It's about a boy and a girl. Lee Seung is the boy, the young servant, and Choi Yunji is the noble girl. I don't know why I assumed it was sapphic. I think I just wanted it to be sapphic. Well, anyways, this is the first book that I got. I'm excited to read it. I'm in the mood for fantasy. I haven't read a fantasy book. That's so stupid. I'm saying that. I'm literally reading Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson as I'm recording this. I haven't read a fantasy book in so long. Insane. Insane. The next book that I got is Harlem Rhapsody. And again, I have no idea what this is about. Based on the cover, based on the title, I imagine this is set in New York City during the Harlem Renaissance. Beyond that, I have no idea. So let's read the inside flap and we'll get a sense of what this is about. In 1919, a school teacher from Washington, D.C. arrives in Harlem, excited to realize her lifelong dream. Jessie Redmond Fawcett has been named the literary editor of The Crisis, the first Black woman to hold this position at a preeminent Negro magazine. Jessie is poised to achieve literary greatness, but she holds a secret that jeopardizes it all. W.E.B. Du Bois. Okay, this is me in the future with a minor update. I am pronouncing W.E.B. Du Bois's name wrong for this clip and the next clip. I had the sinking feeling that I was pronouncing it wrong, so I looked it up, and although W.E.B. Du Bois knew that he had a French spelled and pronounced name, he explicitly wanted it to be pronounced Du Bois, and so by the time you see my third and final update, which I'll be providing later, I'll I'll correct the pronunciation, and I apologize that you will have to watch me stumble through pronouncing it as it's spelled for the synopsis portion of this video and for my first check-in. The founder of the crisis is not only Jesse's boss, he's her lover. Oh my god, is this based on a true story? And neither his wife nor their 14 age difference can keep the two apart. Amidst rumors of their tumultuous affair, Jessie is determined to prove herself. She attacks the challenge of discovering young writers with fervor, finding 16-year-old County Cullen, 17-year-old Langston Hughes, and Nella Larson, who becomes one of her best friends. Is this based on a true story? Langston Hughes is like a real author. And obviously W.E.B. Du Bois is real. Under Jesse's leadership, the crisis thrives, and every African-American writer in the country wants their work published there. When her first novel is released to great acclaim, it's clear that Jessie is at the heart of a renaissance in Black music, theater, and the arts. She has shaped a generation of literary legends, but as she strives to preserve her legacy, she'll discover the high cost of her unparalleled success. This is the extraordinary story of the woman who ignited the Harlem Renaissance. It's a novel. Okay. How much of this is based on a true story, though? Historical note. I attempted to anchor this story in the historical facts I found inside a wealth of information. Biographies, census records, research papers, articles, and podcasts, and I read every issue of the Crisis magazine from October 1919 through September 1925. Reading The Crisis not only showed me what was important to this community, but helped me capture the language of the time. Oh, and this lady was real. Wait. Jessie Redmond Fawcett was a real woman. Oh my gosh. And they had a real relationship. W.E.B. Du Bois and Jessie Redmond Fawcett had a real life. This is so interesting. She's like re-envisioning what this woman's life was, but kind of fictionalizing it. That's so fascinating. Okay, I'll be really curious to read that. Okay, and then finally, the last book that I will be reading, I hope, assuming everything goes well, I placed a hold for Girl on Girl, and I'm being told it's available soon. I placed the hold a couple days ago. I'm second in line. There's 2 copies, so it should be ready. The maximum time that you can have holdout at my libraries is 21 days, which gives me plenty of time to check it out and have it read before this vlog is going to go up. So I anticipate that I will have Girl on Girl checked out and read before this vlog goes up. So let me tell you about what Girl on Girl, How Pop Culture Turned a Generation of Women Against Themselves by Sophie Gilbert is about. It says, what happened to feminism in the 21st century? This question feels increasingly urgent in a moment of cultural and legislative backlash when widespread uncertainty about the movement's power, focus, and currency threatens decades of progress. So I'm excited to read that one. The other 2 books, the comic graphic novel that was based in the West, the American West, was not available. Any of my libraries not available. At Libby, just not even an option. So unfortunately can't be reading that one. And then the book based on the Constitution, I know I said I wasn't that interested in reading it. I have it placed on a hold in case it miraculously becomes available. It was only available in print. I am 7th in line at my library, and unless miraculously people are burning through it really quickly, don't pick up their holds or additional copies enter into circulation, I don't think that one will be available in time for me to read. So I'm anticipating that these are the 3 books I'm going to be reading for this vlog, and I will update you when I get started, and really looking forward to reading. So talk soon. Bye. Hi there. I wanted to give a quick update. I've started reading Girl on Girl, and I have some mixed feelings about it. I will start by saying that I am enjoying the author's writing style. I'm listening to it on audio, and so I'm enjoying that too because the author herself is reading it, and I kind of appreciate that because I'm hearing it the way that she intends for it to be read. And the way that she writes, like, you can tell she writes with such sharp insight, and she has so much rage and fury, it feels like, about the decline of feminism, and the way that feminism has basically been co-opted by so many different forces. Like, it's not just one entity that has co-opted feminism, but I guess really, to put it simply, a paternalistic post-capitalist society has co-opted elements of feminism to their benefit to ensure like profitability, but also a sense of pliance among women and girls. And I think that argument alone is like fine, it's compelling. And her overarching argument, what I took away from the introductory chapter, if you could just sum it up really quickly, is she argued basically the early wave of feminism was this idea of fighting for your rights, fighting to protect yourself from something. So you're protecting yourself from discrimination, or you're protecting yourself from unwanted sexual advances. Whereas this new co-opted form of feminism is protecting your right to something. So you're protecting your right to be flirty and free and do whatever you want. I'm trying to think of good examples that are like a good dichotomy or like a good stark difference. Basically, you're protecting your freedom to like do whatever you want versus you're protecting yourself from something alien, from something that you don't want. And okay, I think that's fine and well. I walked into the book thinking, okay, this is where we're going. I can appreciate those arguments. I think where I'm struggling though is that while she's bringing in so many different elements of pop culture and she has so many different examples and she's building on her arguments, sometimes her examples don't support her claims, not to the best of their ability, in my opinion. And one example that I'll give is that she argued that like women in the modern era are being exploited against their will, which, yeah, point blank period, true. We talk about revenge porn, we talk about being taken advantage of, especially in an era of social media and like even now, like AI. We talk about like, I think Taylor Swift had all those images of her being produced using artificial intelligence of her like naked. That's a clear example of a woman being exploited against her will. But the example that the author gave, on the one hand, was Pamela Anderson's sex tape being sold without her consent and not being able to seek legal recourse because she had previously posed for Playboy. Yeah, that's a clear example. The second example that she gave was Demi Moore posing for a magazine. She was pregnant at the time, and she posed in like a very intimate pose. It was a very intimate photography session that was supposed to just be a photo that was given to her and her husband at the time, Bruce Willis. And after the photos came back, the photographer asked her explicitly if she would be willing to let that photo go to print. And Demi Moore said yes. She gave her consent and said yes. That to me is not exploitation. The author made the case that because Demi Moore was like younger, that it was exploitation. And like, that's a different debate. Sure, like, I just think those are different things. I think there's different things, and I think there were better examples that the author could have utilized, probably from that time's era, of women being exploited against their will. I think the case, and she even talked about, I think it was Kate Hudson, or some of the other young supermodels, like posing in shoots and not wanting to take their clothes off, but being told that they were going to lose future opportunities if they didn't take their clothes off. That's another good, clear example of young women being exploited against their will. But the Demi Moore example, in my opinion, wasn't a very solid example to support her argument because they obtained her consent. They didn't publish without asking her. They obtained her consent. Demi Moore ostensibly knew the risks of publishing something so racy, so intimate to the public. And if she didn't, she could have consulted any of her PR agents. Like, this woman is famous and wealthy. She had resources at her disposal that she could have absolutely consulted. Like, this person
this photographer, this editor wasn't hounding her for an answer. That's not the way that the book made it sound. Perhaps that's what happened, but that's not how it was presented to us. And so all this to say, I just think there have been a couple examples where the author is making an argument, a solid argument, but the examples are not always backing up the case. And that can get a little bit frustrating to listen to because it gives people who disagree with where we're going with feminism opportunities to discredit, why it's important to believe in feminist ideals and why it's important to support the feminist movement. And then I think I'm also taking issue with, this idea that, old wave feminism was all about, women asserting their rights and gaining all these opportunities, and new wave feminism has totally obliterated that with like girl boss power and all these things. And I just think in practice it's more complicated than that. Like, as a woman living in the 21st century, I just think I have a little bit more agency, and there's a little bit more that goes through my brain when I think about my decisions. And just because I don't want to be the most ambitious person in my office, that doesn't mean I'm a bad feminist. Like, just because I don't want to be the next president of the United States of America, that doesn't mean I'm a bad feminist. Like, I think women should have the latitude to approach their life in the way that they want to, and not be dubbed like inhibitors to progress, I guess. And I just think this book is pushing a really restrictive and narrow view on what feminism is. And I'm not a sociologist. I'm not the most well-versed, but I think there has to be some element of choice in feminism, or it's not really a good example of feminism. There's just been a couple red flags for me in this book of like policing who's feminist enough. And I mean, that's what this book is. Like, she's trying to talk down, like, this is where the feminist movement is going wrong and this is where it's going right. But I just think there's been a couple examples where I just don't necessarily agree. And I just think it's perpetuating a really dangerous narrative that's going to be exclusionary to some women who want to be feminists and want to be part of this, and are going to read this sort of thing and feel like, well, feminism's not for me. Maybe I don't know, like, maybe I'm in the wrong here. Maybe I need to think about it some more. Like, I'm going to continue to read it. But I don't know. I'm just taking issue with some of her arguments and definitely some of the examples that she's providing. And I just think, like I said, her approach to feminism has just been a little bit narrow in my opinion. But she's an excellent writer, and she is bringing up a lot of really interesting and unique examples of like how feminism has been co-opted and has been commodified to appeal to a really broad sector of society in negative ways. Like, I'm not discrediting that part. There have just been some things that I think cross the line into unproductive territory. But those are just my opinions so far. Hi there, I finished Girl on Girl this morning, and I also went back and re-listened to the introduction just to make sure I was truly understanding the intent of the book. I think part of where I struggled with this book was that I didn't know if there was a strong thesis going through it. I said in the beginning when I introduced this book that, I outlined a couple arguments that I thought she had, and then obviously on the cover of the book she says that, Girl on Girl, how a generation of women, or how pop culture turned a generation of women against each other. And then I also talked about, this idea of feminism versus post-feminism. And so some of that was, continued to be present through the book. And I'll just say that, I think there were some chapters that worked really well, and it's hard to argue with what she's saying, that
pop culture definitely did turn women against themselves and against each other. Like, the chapters on reality television, on beauty standards, like, those were chapters that I thought were really well done. When you look at and you think back to the early to mid 2000s, I think about The Swan or America's Next Top Model or Kim Kardashian, or not just Kim Kardashian, but Keeping Up with the Kardashians and the Rise of the Kardashians. Those are really concrete examples of how pop culture was really shifting how women should view themselves as objects of desire for predominantly men, rather than, you know, being ambitious or being objects of like women's own desires. I think that was clear. That was well done. But there were a couple other chapters that I just thought didn't make a whole lot of sense to me to be included in this. And one example, she went on this like pretty big tirade against porn. And she says in the book that she's like not anti-porn, and she argues that porn had a big influence on pop culture, which then influences like how women view themselves and also how men view women. And that's fine, but I think that's a separate argument and probably should have been extracted from the book and put somewhere else, in my opinion. And also, she says that she's not anti-porn, but the way that she approached porn, she chose the most graphic and extreme examples of what was happening in the porn industry to make her case. And in my opinion, like, that's not what most porn is. She chose the most graphic, most vile examples of what porn is to make her case. And as I talked about in my first check-in, it really discredits her ability to create arguments when she's choosing straw mans. I guess by and large, like, the bigger issue of like, yeah, I can see where pop culture in the 90s and the 2000s had major implications for the way that specifically millennial women see themselves, and also women like myself who are kind of in the in-between see themselves. Like, when you think about diet culture, when you think about just the things that were on TV or that were in the newspapers, like, absolutely, I'm not going to argue with that. But some of the other arguments that she was making either didn't have good examples to support what she was saying, or just didn't fit, in my opinion, well within this book, or didn't make sense in the context of what I think she was trying to argue regarding bigger structural issues that are happening in post-capitalist societies. And so for that reason, I landed at a 3.5. Like I said, I went back and reread the introduction because this is a book that has received so much praise, not just by NPR, but also by the New York Times and many other publications. And so I really wanted to make sure that I wasn't hitting the mark on this one, but that was just my reading experience. I understand that for a lot of women, especially millennial women, this was a book that hit really well. But for me, some of the arguments that she was making required us to take a leap that wasn't well connected. Like, the bridge between the argument and the conclusion wasn't connected. She just expected you to make the jump yourself, and I wasn't willing to make that jump without additional examples, additional argumentation, substantiating evidence to support the claims. And so for that reason, I landed again at a 3.5. But I will say it was a valuable cataloging of all the things that were definitely going wrong in the 90s and 2000s around how we view women as a society. So on to the next one. I'll check in later. Hi there. I am almost halfway through The Last Tiger, and I've been meaning to provide an update on it, but I just haven't really known where to start because I've been having a hard time parsing through exactly how I'm feeling about this book. I've just been feeling a little bit apathetic about it. I guess we can start with what's happened beyond what we've covered in the synopsis. Really, it is
kind of a fantastical parable to the Japanese occupation of Korea prior to and during World War II. We are introduced to the Dragon Empire colonizing the tiger colonies is what they're referred to, and we are introduced to Seung, who is a young teenage boy, probably I think he's about 17 years old, and at the time that we're introduced to him, he is serving as a servant boy in Choi Yunji's family's home. And in the introductory scenes of this book, he is rounded up by the Dragon Police and the Dragon Empire to witness the slaying of a tiger. The tigers are mythological, kind of reverential creatures, but are also symbolic creatures for the tiger people. And so the murder of this creature is a horrific display of the Dragon Empire's hegemonic powers. But during this, slaying ceremony, as it's called, Seung sees Choi Yunji at the ceremony without a chaperone. And that introduces this interesting dynamic between these two characters, in which Choi Yunji is nervous that Seung will use the information of her being out and about without a chaperone to blackmail her or her family for money. And so they come up with kind of a deal where she's going to train him to pass this examination to get into the Dragon Academy to obtain these mythological powers, in exchange for Seung sneaking Choi Yunji out of the house, out of their family compound, to go on these little adventures together. And kind of in part one of the book, they become a little bit closer. They have feelings for each other. They can definitely not explore them in any meaningful way based on their different stations. And then by the time we get past part one, and this is definitely talked about in the synopsis, I don't think this is a spoiler, they're going in different pathways, and that's where we start off in part two. It's fine. Point blank period. It's fine. I think at times it has felt a little bit predictable. Like, obviously the plot synopsis gives away a ton, and so I feel like I know where the story is going, but even when the two authors are introducing elements of what I think are supposed to be surprise, they're laying out so many breadcrumbs. Like, I don't think I'm like a superior intelligent being in feeling like, oh, I've kind of predicted this. Like, they're laying out the breadcrumbs that, like, I know where this is going, and that's not like a pleasant experience for me. And then also, I just haven't loved the way that they're playing with time. Like, in part one, we kind of experience 9 months of time go by. So we see like the initial kind of bargain being struck, and then like 8 months of time go by, and they kind of condense that down into a couple paragraphs of like, time passes and the seasons pass, and these are a couple things that we did, and then, oh, we have like 3 weeks left together, and then this big thing happens, and then we go our separate ways. And then the same thing happens as we get into part two, where they're like, oh my gosh, so much time has passed in a year, and this is where we're going. And that just feels a little bit choppy to me. So I understand they have to do that to keep the story moving, but you don't really ever get to sit with anything. And like I said, it just feels a little bit choppy so far. I'm thinking that we're gonna probably have to move past that in parts 2 and 3. Like, I'm thinking we're gonna stay in the same time period, but I don't know. We might not. They might continue to kind of have to use time breaks to push things along. I like the way that they are exploring different themes of gender and oppression, colonization, class, definitely class issues. You can definitely tell that it's a parable of Japanese occupation and oppression, but there are some things that feel really on the nose and really obvious. I think that's fine for like a young adult book. It's not my cup of tea, but also I'm not the intended audience. I prefer like when you leave a little bit on the table to be thought about versus outlining like, and this is the implications of oppression and like this is what the empire is trying to do. It's like I can see that, but thanks for laying it out for me. And then I don't know, also like thinking about the time period, like theoretically this is set in like the 1930s, 1940s. There have been like some contemporary slang that's been dropped in, like dude and kiddo. That kind of takes me out of the story, not only historically but also like fantastical settings. I haven't loved that. I'm reading through it pretty quickly. I don't know, I'm watching the Olympics right now. I'm so excited it's Olympic season, and anytime there's a commercial, I've been reading it. I'm getting through it pretty quickly. I'm like 174 pages in, and I'm only just now feeling like maybe I could be invested in what's going on. And I feel like that's a really long ways to wait until I'm kind of like, well, maybe I could be invested in these two characters. We'll just have to see how this is executed in the end. I think the authors, like, they have a really good concept and it's a really interesting premise, and I like the ideas that they're playing with, but just so far the execution for me hasn't been perfect, and I'm just having a hard time connecting with the story. But we'll see. I think we could be at a turning point where maybe my interest is peaked and maybe things turn around. But I don't know. I really have put off updating you all because I've just been having a little bit of a hard time connecting to this. So I don't know. More to follow. I'll let you all know.
First trip to the Olympics, through his practices and through warm-ups and just...
Okay, good evening. I finished The Last Tiger a couple days ago, but I have not had time to update you all. I've been very busy. Chris and I went to a concert on Monday. We went to Electric Guest at the 930 Club in DC, which was opened up by Snack Time. We had a great time. I've been listening to Electric Guest since I was in high school, and it was really fun to hear some throwback songs that I was obsessed with when I was like a freshman and a sophomore. And also to hear some of the songs that they've come out in the last couple years. And Snack Time was great too. I'd never heard any songs by Snack Time. They're a band from Philadelphia, and they have like a full kind of jazz ensemble. So they had big brass, so trumpet, trombone, saxophone, and they sang with a lot of love and a lot of soul, and it's always really fun to be introduced to new music. So we had a late night on Monday, and then Tuesday I'm still, like, I volunteer for the honors college that I attended when I was an undergrad, and they put out a call to kind of help select the scholarship recipients every year. So in December, I was reviewing their kind of written application materials, and then on Tuesday, I was interviewing kind of those who made it to the second round. So I had a late night on Tuesday. And then yesterday was Wednesday. I took a little bit of a break. I was reading my next book, Harlem Rhapsody, and then also watching the Olympics. So I don't know. I'm here on Thursday, a couple days before the vlog goes up, and I'm ready to give you an update on The Last Tiger that I finished like days and days ago. And most of the things that I gave you an update about when I first checked in rang true. I will say I had kind of just finished part one, and part one was definitely the weakest part of the novel. I thought parts 2 and 3 were much stronger than part 1, but the things that I was struggling with in part 1 continued to be challenging with me throughout the book. I thought the dialogue at times was really stilted. I think the character development between our main characters, I think Seung's character development was stronger than Choi Yoonji's character development. Choi Yoonji, especially with some of the decisions that she made, especially towards the end, I didn't think there was a really strong resolution there.
we moved on really quickly from some of the things that she decided to do. Whether you agreed with them or not, like, that's not the issue, but we just moved on really fast from the things that she decided to do. And I don't know, I was surprised by that. I didn't think it was very clean or satisfactory. And then the plot too, you know, I mentioned in part 1 it felt a little bit slow, a little bit choppy. In part 3, the wrap up, the conclusion to the story felt really rushed, and so much to the point where it was almost confusing what was happening, but like as we were trying to wrap up this like culminating moment. And I'll leave it at that. Like parts 1 and part 3 definitely were the weaker of the 3. Part 2, though, I really enjoyed. I thought we were getting into some really deep conversations. I thought we were exploring some of the parable, the moments of the parable, some of the things that were going on in occupied Korea, but then also things that were going on as Japan was waging war in China that was being explored in this fantastical world, I thought, well, in part 2. In part because we got the introduction of 2 additional characters that I thought helped our other 2 main characters explore their thoughts, their motivations with better nuance and precision than the 2 main characters did when they were together. That's just my personal opinion on that matter. I think the romance between Choi Yoonji and Lee Seung felt a little bit tepid for me. I don't know if I was fully sold on it. And it's just a little bit challenging because they're basing it on their grandparents' actual stories. And so I'll go back to what I said in part 1, where I just think conceptually and like the source of inspiration for the book is really strong. I just don't think the execution was done very perfectly in terms of plotting, in terms of pacing, in terms of character development and character arc. I just think there was a little bit left to be desired, but playing with Korean folklore, playing with kind of a parable within a fantastical world, playing with some of the deeper moral lessons when they weren't a smack in the face, when they let you like think for yourself, doing less telling or less telling, more showing. You know, that's when I think the novel did well. And so I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 for when the stronger elements sang, but there definitely were deductions for some of the things that I struggled with. But I think, yeah, with some more editing, I think it could have done a little bit better, and I think both these authors have immense potential. And I just think too, throughout the novel, I just kept thinking how I would want this book to be different. And that's not really fair, but I just couldn't help my brain from going there. I wish that, you know, X, Y, and Z, like there were a lot of other things that I wish had been different. And I just think that's maybe a testament to maybe the editing could have been a little bit different. Maybe the inspiration was good, but the execution just wasn't there.
Okay, I also, on this book, I forgot to mention when I was wrapping up, and it was my biggest pet peeve about The Last Tiger. I mentioned that I thought this book needed additional editing, and I just want to give you one more example that's not a spoiler of where I think this book needed some help with editing. There's quite a few scenes in The Last Tiger where we have like combat scenes where people are getting hit in the head. There's quite a few scenes like that, like probably more than 10, where people are getting into circumstances where they're, you know, getting their heads hit. And in every single scene except for one, the authors use the same phrase, which is like, I saw stars, or I got hit over the head and I saw stars, or I was seeing stars, or it made me see stars. Every single time. I remember I was literally reading the book, and on one page I read I was seeing stars, and on the next page I read I was seeing stars, and I put the book down and I thought,
this can't be real. Like, I'm reading back to back the same exact phrase, and there was just no care to editing between the two. And there was only one instance where someone got hit in the head and they chose to use a different phrase. And I just felt like there has to be another way to describe taking a blow to the head. Only seeing stars is not only super cliche, but having it repeated every single time someone gets into a combative situation was just really repetitive and annoying. And yeah, just another example of where I thought this could have been more tightly edited. Now I want to move to Harlem Rhapsody. And if you'll remember from the introduction, we are exploring the life of a real life woman who was the literary editor for the Crisis magazine, which was the NAACP's. It was basically a magazine exploring and celebrating Black life in America in the 20s, but I think it continued to be published for many, many years, if I'm understanding correctly. Like, I think it was published through the 60s, maybe into the 70s. I'd have to double check that, but it was in print for a very long time. And Jessie Redmond Fawcett was the first literary editor, and she was a woman at the time that was incredible. And we are exploring her move to Harlem, as Harlem was coming up as a haven for especially Black artists at the time, and her role in elevating other Black artists, specifically Black writers, but also her long-standing affair with W.E.B. Du Bois. Checking in again. Yes, I'm still pronouncing this incorrectly. It will be corrected the next time that you see me. I understand now it is pronounced W.E.B. Du Bois. My bad for not catching this sooner. I wish I had looked it up sooner. Please accept my apology in understanding that the correct pronunciation is W.E.B. Du Bois, based on his own desires, not our classical understanding of this spelling and pronunciation. I will say I'm about, 75 pages into this so far? Yeah. And so funny, this was selected as the NPR's on the longer side. It's so funny. The Last Tiger was longer than Harlem Rhapsody, so I don't know what NPR qualified as on the longer side, maybe over 350 pages. But yeah, anyways, this is shorter than The Last Tiger. But I'm enjoying it so far. I'm learning a ton. The author, I think, at times can't help herself, but celebrating all the really cool things that were happening in Black culture at this really seminal moment in American history and American culture. She'll just history drop things that were going on, works of literature that were being published, prominent Black people who were getting PhDs or just going on and doing really amazing things, getting incredible accomplishments. And so that's been kind of fun. And then I think also too, it just being set during, the time when Harlem is becoming this really iconic space for Black people in the United States has been really interesting to read about. And then also, I think the 20s, I understand the 20s and always think about kind of Great Gatsby-esque things, and that's what the 20s in my mind conjure. And it's fun to read about the author's depictions of the 1920s in terms of kind of the first introductions of automobiles widely being used, but then also elevators having to be hand lifted and people being positioned in elevators to be able to lift you, or the descriptions of restaurants and the wait staff, and the descriptions of typewriters and secretaries, and just how different American life was 100 years ago. I'm enjoying that part of this so far, and just how different culture was too. There's a discussion of, this is a woman who's in her late 30s, she's not married, she's having a very active affair that's, pretty well known about. She lives with her mom or her stepmom, everyone in her family knows about it and like definitely does not approve of her behavior. And some of the discussions that are happening there about, you know, a single Black woman moving to a city to take up a position, the first of its kind for women who typically don't serve in these preeminent professional positions, but also engaging in an extramarital affair. You know, it's uncommon, it's unheard of. And so she, in a lot of ways, is breaking barriers, whether you agree with the morality of it or not. You know, there's a lot to dig into and think about here. I'm definitely taken by the relationship that she has with W.E.B. Du Bois. I'm definitely not one who condones cheating, which she's not cheating. It's him. He's cheating. She, like, obviously is knowingly engaging in this affair, knowing that he's married. But it's just interesting the way that the author has taken sources from their lives, you know, letters and other things that have been left behind in order to kind of piece together this fictionalized telling of their lives. When you love someone, it's hard to drop them, even when you know it's maybe like not the best thing for you or for them, not the best thing for your career. But I don't know. Yeah. So I'm excited to keep reading this. I'll continue to check in with you over the next like day or two before this vlog goes up. But I'm enjoying this so far. I'm enjoying the rich descriptions. I'm really enjoying the definitely getting to see like what work life looked like for a woman in the early 1920s, late 1910s, especially a Black woman. And the rise of Harlem and the elevation of like talented Black writers. I think that's been really cool and inspiring to read about. Okay, good evening. I have finished Harlem Rhapsody and I'm giving it a 4.25 out of 5. This is my most successful book of the vlog. I really enjoyed this book. I don't have too many updates to provide since I first checked in with you all. I'll just say I really enjoyed this kind of historical novel fictionalizing this woman, Jessie Redmond Fawcett, who has kind of been lost to time and history despite this really prominent role that she played in Harlem, raising so many Black artists to the point of prominence that we know them today through the crisis, but also through encouraging them and in editing the works that became published and became famous, and also through the work that she published herself. More than, you know, the exploration of the work that she was doing and the art that she was engaging with, I particularly enjoyed the exploration of her affair with W.E.B. Du Bois. I thought this book handled the complications and kind of the turbulence of that affair really nicely, and just handled her struggle with the morality, people's perceptions of the affair, and just her kind of inability to parse out what to do with the affair really well. And I also I liked Jessie Redmond Fawcett's kind of 6-year journey that we see in this story as she is serving as the literary editor, as we see her grapple with ambition in a time when women aren't serving in, highly visible professional roles, let alone Black women serving in like highly visible professional roles while being involved with their bosses. All of that was just really fascinating, and I really enjoyed that. Of course, the author definitely played with time and pulled in people who are real earlier than they would have actually been introduced in real life, but I think that helped create, a little bit more of a rich tapestry than maybe what happened in real life, and, I appreciated that. I think the only thing in my mind that kind of stands out when you're reading a fictionalized account of someone's real life is how accurate are the portrayals of the life. She talks about in her author's note and in the historical note that she drew on letters between Jessie Redmond Fawcett and W.E.B. Du Bois and other people's letters describing them, but the correspondence between the two of them was really limited, and so I just have to question, in my mind, is her depiction of their relationship, but then also the two of them as individuals, authentic? And I don't know. I'm not in a position to judge whether it is or isn't. I will say I think there's a lot more out there about W.E.B. Du Bois in terms of what he has written, what he has published, his correspondence with other people. I think is a lot easier to paint a more complete picture of who he is, and I think I had a really solid idea, and I think he was portrayed really well in this book. I think just based on quotes that were pulled from Jessie's poetry, but then also some speeches that she gave, there were times when the dialogue in the book and also her internal monologues seemed to me a little bit softer than what I read as being actual direct quotes that were used in here. But that's not to say that this author's portrayal is wrong. It's just her creative portrayal. I thought she did a nice job with, talking about her and W.E.B. Du Bois and all the supporting cast and the characters. Speaking about the supporting characters and the supporting cast, I really enjoyed the building of community, specifically in Harlem. That being said, there were a ton of characters to keep track of, and in a 370-ish page novel, at times it felt a little bit overwhelming. For the most part, the core cast and the people that you regularly came in contact, I felt like I had a really good grasp of, but there were times when we'd be bringing in an author that was introduced in the very beginning, I'd have to be oh my god, I don't remember who that is, or we'd be bringing in a publisher or someone who was on the NAACP board that was introduced in an early chapter, and I'd be oh, I don't remember who that was. And it's just because the nature of traveling across 6 years where we're introduced to this woman's community that she's built up over that time, at times it was just a little bit challenging to keep track of, but the author didn't do anything wrong. It's just a matter of this woman had a really rich life and a really rich community, and is a testament to the work that she was doing. It was just a little bit challenging to keep track of, and in part that was, I think, a little bit of the design of the book too. Especially in those early chapters, she was introducing so many people in quick succession to try to introduce the main characters of the story to set you up for the rest of the book. At times it got a little bit overwhelming. But overall, really enjoyed this book, really enjoyed the conversations that we were having about gender, about ambition, about the complicated relationships that you can have romantically, but then also with your family. And then just the role that a single individual can play in elevating entire communities and making huge differences. That was a really incredible message in this book, and really happy that I had the opportunity to read that. To, I guess, wrap up the vlog, I read 3 books, the first of which was Girl on Girl. I gave that a 3.5. Just a quick recap, while I enjoyed the passion that the author brought, and I think the kind of the main argument that she is talking about, that like the pop culture era of the late 90s and the early 2000s was largely destructive for the way in which women see themselves. There were some challenges that I had with the way in which the author was approaching arguments, and then also just the way that she chose to approach the topic of feminism at times, to me, felt a little bit narrow and didn't always, in my opinion, appreciate the idea that women should have choice in feminism, and didn't respect that women will disagree. Like, even if you disagree with another woman, doesn't mean you should disrespect her. And I think at times the book towed a line, went over the line and into areas that were a little bit unproductive in the conversation. The next book that I read, The Last Tiger, is a young adult parable of the Japanese occupation of Korea during World War II. And we follow like a young servant boy and kind of a relatively privileged young girl, and they are kind of like star-crossed lovers. They go down different paths, come together again, and go on a journey to kind of debate the morality of colonization. And then Harlem Rhapsody is the fictionalized retelling of Jessie Redmond Fawcett's life and her role in uplifting literature and literary voices in and around Harlem, specifically Black literary voices in and around Harlem in the late 19-teens and the 1920s, with specific emphasis on her affair with W.E.B. Du Bois. And I gave this a 3.5, and I gave this a 4.25. I am eternally grateful to the NPR Books We Love list, even though this wasn't maybe like not the most successful reading vlog. I love NPR. I love the articles that they put out talking about new releases every week. I love the deep dives that they do into different books that are coming out, and I love the Books We Love list. I love that it offers different kind of customization, different ways to filter, and my favorite list to look at is always book club recommendations, but then also there's like a stellar writing, or like, I don't know, it's like a great writing list. That's my favorite one to look at. And so maybe if I do this in the future, I can explore some of the different categories, or take out one of the other elements of randomization and kind of peruse the list on my own, or choose ones that look interesting to me. But it's a really valuable resource if you have an idea, or even if you don't have an idea, and I highly encourage you to check it out for your own purposes. And if you've stuck around this long, tell me what events you've been watching in the Olympics. I've been watching everything. I know I've only shown you figure skating and curling, but I have been watching just about everything. The only thing I haven't really watched is hockey. My favorite events to watch are figure skating, snowboarding, skiing, but I'll watch anything. The Olympics I'll watch any sporting event. I love sports, but the Olympics are my favorite because they're like a time-bound thing. You only see them every 2 years, and I just love seeing so many different sports that I don't get to see very often. A first for me watching this year was the ski jumping. That was crazy. I don't even know how you judge that. Like, I mean, I listen to the commentators talk about how you judge that, but they just look like flying squirrels out there to me. And, anyways, if you're watching the Olympics, let me know what's been your favorite. What are your favorite moments? I'd love to chat about it because I've been watching all the highlights and all the, I've been watching even like before I go to work, when I come home, and I'd love to catch up. So thanks for watching this far. Talk soon.